on the left that he is in fact a dictator. At an event yesterday, Hillary Clinton suggested that President Trump is on the verge of taking over this country somehow and destroying the Constitution. Watch this.
As someone who grew up in Vienna and barely escaped the Holocaust, my mother would say from time to time that it could happen here. What are your concerns about the stability of our democratic institutions and structures in these tumultuous moments?
I worry about the degradation of institutions. I'm more worried about whether our Constitution is going to be honored. So I'm hoping that the worst, the kind of question you asked me, Ruth, is just never even approached. We never get to that. But it will require people turning up and voting in these midterm elections.
Really worried about the Constitution as we try to invalidate the first two amendments to the Bill of Rights, right? There it is, though. He's a dictator, and that's not a novel take on the left. Calling Trump a dictator is something of a religious ritual now, actually.
We have a president with a strong authoritarian personality, and what frightens me is not only his respect and adoration for tyrants all over the world, but his disrespect for democracy in our own country.
We're getting more North Korean every day in this country.
There is nothing American about what Donald Trump did in Pennsylvania. He goes out there and whips up like it's a Mussolini rally. Yes, that's what I said.
I say they must call for his impeachment. Some people are saying that, well, we'll vote in 2020. We cannot stand that. We cannot wait for that. It is too dangerous.
Who put all the dumb people on TV? Somehow, despite being a dictator, people feel perfectly free to criticize the president in public to massive cheers. Nobody notices the irony. Ethan Behrman is a California radio show host and a frequent guest on our show. We're glad to have him always. He joins us tonight. Ethan, thanks for coming on. So I guess if you were a dictator, the first thing you'd want to do is take away people's right to say what they think and then take away their right to defend themselves. The first two amendments to the Bill of Rights. Is Trump doing? Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. His opponents are working on that, on invalidating and then repealing those amendments. So maybe this is transference, I'm guessing.
Well, I think the issue here, though, is he opened his campaign out like in a very authoritarian way. Let's call somebody else a bad name. Mexicans are rapists, right? So let's point out what is wrong with other people, focus on a Muslim ban. We can't allow them into the country. That is an authoritarian move, or reaching to the other, pointing to them, and reaching into our dark places. I don't like that any bit. By the way, on the First Amendment side, he wants to strengthen defamation laws to make it easier to sue the press and other people. But in
real life,
so
look, I would say the phrases you describe would fall under the heading of rudeness, being impolite. Look, I'm not going to defend that. I think you should. I'm an Episcopalian. I believe in politeness, okay? But let's be real. Dictators do two things. One, they try to narrow the range of acceptable opinion, and they punish people who fall outside of it. That is the left doing that, not the right. Pardon me, that's true. And two, they take away people's right to defend themselves. They double down on their monopoly on the use of force. They're the only ones with guns, and the left is doing that too. So Trump may be a lot of things. You don't like him, I get it. But the authoritarian tendencies are on the left. Do you not see that?
No, I mean, well, some on the extreme left I would actually agree with you on, but no, absolutely not. Look, anti-Jewish crimes, according to the ADL, went up 57% here in the United States last year under Trump's watch in 2017 at a rate and a number that hasn't been seen in a very long time. This is an alarming trait that we've been seeing.
I wonder where that's coming from, though. I mean, I know that you're sort of at the vanguard of calling for increased Muslim immigration into the country. Taking a look across the ocean at Europe, where crimes against Jews, anti-Semitic crime, has risen dramatically in, say, Paris, is that being led by right-wingers, or is it being led by Muslim immigrants?
Oh, you don't think any of the extreme right-wing nationalists in places like Germany and France have anything to do with any of that as well?
Maybe some. I don't know. I mean, maybe, but let's be real. Ask anybody. I mean, talk to any Israeli who recently moved from France. I don't think they're mad at Marine Le Pen. They're really upset about Muslim immigration because the anti-Semitism is coming from Muslims. So given that we know that, it's kind of beyond debate, why would you, as someone who's concerned about that, be calling for more Muslim immigration here?
I haven't specifically called for more Muslim immigration. What I have called for is a continuance of our legal immigration programs and embracing those who are already here, Tucker. I think it's important to include and involve people in our communities and not set them apart and make them into the other, which appeals to the Jungian shadow, which is bad. We don't need to appeal to the dark side.
No, I'm opposed to the Jungian shadow. I am. But I'm also opposed to Freudian projection, since we're getting deep into German psychiatrists. And I just think it's very striking that if you're concerned about government overreach and the election of a dictator, and I actually am concerned about that, I think all good Americans are. The framers were concerned about it. That's why they wrote the Constitution the way they did. Then you ought to be terrified of anybody who attacks your freedom to say what you think is true. And what I find so striking is how nobody on the left ever says anything. As universities kick kids out, punish people for having divergent points of view, don't allow speakers to say what they think. Like, that's fascist stuff. Why doesn't anybody ever mention that?
Well, two things. One, next time you're in San Francisco, listen to my show, or you can listen online, Tucker. I actually talk about that. I don't appreciate shutting down free speech.
Good.
I think it's very important that you and I have these conversations. We must, in a democracy, having the fair exchange of ideas. However, there are some thoughts and ideas that don't deserve to be aired, and you and I have a tendency to choose not to air those. No.
They don't deserve to be aired, so you don't have the right. So everything's cool unless people disagree with you, in which case we have to punish them. Oh, well, sure, but you're not. Wait, hold on. What I'm saying is the left is punishing people for saying what they think is true. Now, not everyone agrees with everyone else's opinion. Like, to have free speech, you have to tolerate the views of people you disagree with, and the left no longer does. You don't see that as authoritarian.
No, I do not agree with you that the left no longer does. I think that is a very small fringe element that tries to shut it down. I think
Google, Facebook, Twitter, biggest companies in America? I mean, leading boycotts against people whose opinions you don't like? You don't see this as troubling?
Yeah, any time that we shut down free speech in an open and public place, I'm absolutely on your side on that one. Organizations have a place to keep a workplace friendly and open to all people. And if you're offending your person sitting next to you, that is something that HR has to deal with, because we also have laws related to that too.
That's where speech goes to die. HR, of course. Ethan, thank you so much. Good luck with your HR department.
Happy
Victor
Easter.
Davis Hanson. A far deeper man than I. He's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution and professor of classics emeritus at Cal State Fresno, and who joins us tonight. Professor, you spent a lot of time studying dictatorships and how they take power from the people and hold it to themselves and basically do what they will despite popular sentiment. What are the things that dictatorships do first to prepare the way for totalitarian rule?
One of the things that Hillary Clinton said in that speech is they destroy trust and transparency, and that was quite ironic because she was introduced to the national scene in her late 30s by parlaying a $1,000 investment in cattle futures into a $100,000 investment, which was a mockery of the whole transparent idea of investment. And it was 4 trillion to 1 odds, and then she didn't pay taxes. Fast forward 40 years through, Travelgate, Filegate, the Rose Law Firm records, Uranium One, the email, they all have one constant common denominator, Tucker, and that's a lack of transparency and a feeling that she's exempt from the equal application of the law. So it's kind of, I don't know whether to laugh or cry, but one of the ironies, when she gave that speech, she got $25,000. Had she given it 2 years ago or 4 years ago, she would have had 100 times that amount, as would her husband, because they had something that people wanted, and that was influence to buy. And so now she doesn't have it, and she's sort of bitter, and she's shrill, and she's angry, but she's engaged in projection where she's fobbing off the perceived sins of herself onto others. And this is, you made a good point, because every time a Republican is in power, he's a Nazi, a brown shirt. When George W. Bush was there in 2006, if you remember, Al Gore, George Soros, Garrison Keillor, Linda Ronstadt, he was a fascist brown shirt. We had a movie about how to kill him. We had a novel, Checkpoint. And then suddenly he's out, he doesn't have the reins of power anymore, and he's a sober and judicious never-Trumper. But now Donald Trump has inherited the same role. We have the same documentary about killing him. We have an op-ed about John Wilkes Booth again. We have the Nazi slur. And it's all based on the premise that exalted so-called noble means justify any noble ends justify any means of obtaining them. And it's it's again and again and again. And I'm not worried about Donald Trump until he weaponizes the IRS in the manner of Lois Lerner under the Obama administration, or that if Mike Pompeo had 30,000 emails he was destroying, I'd be really worried at Secretary of State, or if H.R. McMaster had ordered surveillance be en masse and leaked from the NSC, or they warped at the Trump administration was trying to warp the FISA courts with an anti-Hillary hit piece, I'd be worried. But so far, it's been on the other side.
Yeah, that would be worrisome. All of it.
It would,
and I think
because
we would
it would
be
be an
honest.
assault
I
on
hope
our
I would be
institutions.
honest enough to say it, too, if they ever do that.
I hope
Professor,
I would, too.
I think you would be. I know you would be. Professor, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Got news for you. The wife of Pulse nightclub shooter Omar Mateen has been acquitted on criminal charges stemming from the massacre. Noor Salman was charged with obstruction of justice and providing material support to terrorism. A jury was not convinced of that. That acquittal comes just after a revelation that the FBI used Mateen's father as a confidential source and then covered up that fact, lied about it after the shooting. We're going to learn more about that story, and of course we'll bring it to you as we do. Facebook. Very bad week for Facebook. Now things are getting worse. The company may have given illegal assistance to Barack Obama's 2012 campaign. Doesn't sound like them, does it? We'll investigate live from Washington on Good Friday. Well, we learned this week that CNN executives are assiduous viewers of this show, and of course we're flattered. We know that because CNN has announced that actually it may not be a good idea to support foreign dictatorships. Last week we told you about CNN Turk. That's a channel in Turkey, a CNN franchise that has for years repeated the political talking points of Turkey's authoritarian, anti-American Islamist government. Mr. Erdogan in the picture right behind me. Well, now in a deal worth more than $900 million, a major stake in CNN Turk is about to be sold to a conglomerate whose head has literally referred to Erdogan as his boss. CNN and Erdogan in business together. Well, now in a rare fit of conscience, CNN says it may reconsider its association with anti-American foreign autocrats since they've been caught. In a statement to Fox, the network said this, quote, "We will be meeting with the new owners in due course to discuss the implications of the sale. If following those conversations we have any reason whatsoever to believe the journalistic integrity of the channel could be compromised by the new owners, we'll revoke the license." Which is funny, since CNN Turk for years has been carrying water for the Erdogan government, even as it beat and killed protesters in the streets. CNN has been carrying its water, showing at one point a penguin documentary rather than the repressive crackdown by the Turkish secret police. Anyway, we're glad CNN is watching this show. We welcome this development. And in the future, of course, we encourage CNN to care about journalistic integrity even before they're called out for backing dictators. Well, Facebook's disastrous week is continuing to get even worse thanks to yet another scandal. In 2012, it turns out, the company handed over user data to Barack Obama's presidential campaign, and in doing so may have violated the law. Fox News 24/7 headlines anchor Brett Larson has more on that. Brett, what do you know?
Hey, Tucker. Yeah, not a good week to be Facebook, basically. What we're finding out today is there's reports that in 2012, they may have just given user data to the Barack Obama campaign. There were reports in the Daily Mail that the former person who ran the Facebook campaign for Barack Obama, the social media for him, that someone at Facebook said, "We're giving this to you because we agree with you." Of course, giving them that information for free would be a violation of the federal campaign finance laws, because that would be a violation of rather direct or indirect giving of. So they're basically giving a campaign donation in that situation, and you can't do that in federal elections, so both for the president and for Congress. Then we're also learning today that Hillary Clinton's name coming up once again, now connected to all the problems with Facebook, that the app she was using during the 2016 campaign, and they were encouraging people to connect with their friends, that they may have been going through your contacts list and doing that illegally and taking the data of their users to encourage people to vote for Hillary Clinton, to try and find people that they could persuade to be voters. Not very good news for Facebook all around, and this is all in light of the problems that they're having with the Cambridge Analytica story that we've been following for the past couple of weeks with the 50 million users and the data that was taken from them. And then this very, I think, damning piece of information, BuzzFeed's reporting on this, a former Facebook executive saying something about what their site does and how they connect people. And he, in part, says about Facebook, anything that allows us to connect more people more often is de facto good, despite the fact that they had concerns that doing this could even allow someone to coordinate a terrorist attack or even expose someone to bullying. So, Tucker, it is a bad week to be Facebook.
Yeah, and it should be. And I'm glad that other people are paying attention to this now, not just us. Brett, thank you, Pat.
Thanks, Tucker.
Hans von Spakovsky is a former member of the Federal Election Commission. He's a senior legal fellow with the Heritage Foundation in Washington, and he joins us tonight. Hans, thanks for coming on.
Sure.
So if it turns out that the Obama campaign received this data, that would be an in-kind contribution, correct?
It is, because it's very valuable data. And in fact, the former media director for the Obama campaign said that Facebook actually came to their offices and said, well, we don't normally give this data out, but we're going to let you have it because we favor your campaign. That turns it into potentially an illegal corporate contribution.
Well, how would that not be illegal? How would that not be a crime?
Well, you know, if they made this data available to anybody who wants it, well, then, of course, any campaign could get it. But the fact that they specifically had rules against this does make it an in-kind contribution. Contrast this with what they did with Cambridge Analytica. Remember, Cambridge Analytica, when they found out about this, they went to Cambridge Analytica and said, you need to destroy this data. You're not supposed to have it. And that tells you that in the one case, they let the campaign have it. In another case, they were saying, well, no, you're not supposed to have this data.
So Facebook, but also Google and Twitter and Apple, the big tech companies, could easily throw an election, and we wouldn't know it. And so we should be terrified of this. I don't think we're terrified enough. But what is the U.S. Congress, what are the appropriate agencies in the executive branch doing to make sure that these huge companies who have more power than any companies we've ever had in human history are remaining transparent? I mean, we're certain this is not happening. What are they doing to reassure us of that?
Well, for example, in the case of the Obama campaign, potentially getting a corporate contribution, which is illegal, that ought to be investigated by the Federal Election Commission, where I used to be a commissioner, because it's a potential violation of federal law. No idea whether they are going to open up an investigation. Potentially, also, the U.S. Justice Department could investigate it, because if it was an intentional and knowing violation of the law, that takes it from being a civil violation to a criminal violation. So both of those federal agencies have potential jurisdiction over this. So far, no one has said at any of those agencies that they're going to open up an investigation. That's what they ought to do, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, if you have lunch with any of your friends, encourage them.
I will do that.
Thank you very much. Facebook is the only company with a big political effect, and politics isn't the only way tech is hurting America. Not by far. Next week, we're spending all week on a special series on what big tech is doing to you, your children, our culture, this country, our politics. It's changing all of those things, and we should know how, and we're going to tell you how. Well, the media were utterly scandalized when anonymous reports suggested that the Interior Secretary, Ryan Zinke, may care more about competence than about diversity. Did he commit a sin in hiring on the basis of ability? What sin? We'll tell you next. Well, members of President Trump's administration have been accused of all manner of things, from domestic abuse to spying for the Russians. But here's an amazing one. Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, former SEAL, accused of the worst sin of all, not loving diversity enough. A breaking report this week by CNN accused Zinke of seeking to hire the best people for jobs at the Interior Department without regard to their appearance. That was the chyron. Zinke angers by hiring the best. Very offensive. The report was denied, of course, by Zinke, but the left still reacted with horror. Kristen Clark is President and Executive Director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, and she joins us now. Kristen, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So I know I can't speak for anyone else, but when I saw that CNN report that Ryan Zinke was daring to hire the best people, I thought, what is this country coming to? You know, hiring people on the basis of relevant criteria like experience or skill or commitment. I mean, that's just wrong, and I think you would agree with that.
No, we want people who are qualified and experienced, especially at the helm of our nation's most important federal agencies. But we also need to make sure that those agencies reflect the growing diversity of our country. And I'm not just talking about racial diversity, I'm talking about gender diversity and ethnic diversity. And at every turn this administration, we've seen efforts to turn the clock back. We know that diversity is not a priority for this administration, whether we're talking about cabinet-level appointments or judicial appointments. This administration is one that has not placed a premium on diversity.
What do you think of the NFL?
Well,
do you like the NFL?
That's a totally different context.
Oh, it is. But do the same standards apply there? I mean, why do they get a pass from the? No, this is a real question. Why do they get a pass on the diversity thing in the NFL? Is there a reason?
Well, when we look at the coaching ranks, there's a lot of work to do.
No, I'm talking about the players. No, slow down.
I'm talking about underrepresented.
Great, and I'm on your side. But the players, it's all male. It's disproportionately African American. Does that bother you?
The NFL is a sport, so is a male sport, so I'm not surprised that it's all male.
But does it bother you? I mean, why do they get a pass from the normal? Because their point is, like, we hire the best. And actually, I think the NFL really doesn't care what color you are. I mean, they just want the best players. And is that offensive? When you watch it, are you thinking, I can't watch this? They're not following the diversity rules.
What really bothers me is my taxpayer dollars, your taxpayer dollars, going to support federal agencies that don't reflect the diversity of our country, Tucker.
What about when you fly on an airplane? I mean, do you think that airlines should apply the same diversity rules you're calling for here? That they shouldn't take the people who score the highest on the pilot tests, but that they should hire also on appearance, the way people look?
Every workplace, whether you're talking about airlines or federal agencies, should hire the best, but should place a premium on diversity. And
but which is more important, the way that you look or what you do, what you're capable of doing? So, like when you're flying a plane, how important is it what you look like, your appearance?
Incredibly important, and it's also important that we have. It's also important that we place a premium on diversity, and the fact that we have people in this
administration. But diversity means appearance. It means what you look like.
No,
you're talking about the shallowest possible criterion. It's your literally your shade. That's what you're saying.
Well,
why is that more important than talent?
You know what matters, Tucker? What matters is that your white daughters and that my black son can turn on that TV and see an administration that reflects the diversity of our country. Gender diversity, racial diversity, ethnic diversity. And we're not
what matters to me is that the government is run by competent people. And if they're all Pacific Islanders, I don't care where they're from. I don't care what they look like, because I don't think that what you look like is the most important thing, because I'm not shallow.
President Trump.
But you're arguing that it is, and I'm wondering why.
President Trump's appointees have been virtually all white and all male. And we haven't seen anything this remarkable since the Reagan years. And our
but I'm just wondering, I mean, you're just not getting anywhere with me, because if you can argue that one of them is doing a bad job, I'll agree with you. And actually, I think some of them are not that impressive. I'll be completely blunt with you. But it has nothing to do with what they look like. Because, again, I'm not a shallow person. I don't judge people on their appearance, just as I don't judge books on their covers. I try to get a little deeper than that. And I'm wondering why, as a society, we've decided the shallowest possible measure is the most important. Do you ever stop and ask yourself that?
Diversity is one among a number of factors that this administration should be taking into account when it appoints cabinet-level positions all the way down. We want a federal government that reflects the diversity of our country.
But I wonder, by diversity, again, I just want to be totally clear. If you mean like diversity of skills, I'm totally with you. But when you were little, did you ever think you'd be arguing to judge people primarily on how they look?
You know, I'm talking about gender diversity. I'm talking about racial diversity, Tucker.
Okay,
89% of President Trump's judicial nominees have been white male. Have been white male. Many of them are horrible.
You're speaking a foreign language
nominee Peterson, who had to pull out because he knows nothing about how federal courts operate.
That's a problem. Look, I'm with you there. You shouldn't ever hire incompetent people. I don't care what they look like. No incompetent people. I'm with you. Kristen, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Secretary Zinke is still employed for the time being, but another member of the administration was not so fortunate. A former Trump speechwriter says his life was destroyed by the media without a shred of evidence against him. He joins us with his story next. In the past 2 years, the media have adopted a new principle. If someone is connected to the current administration, that person can be targeted for destruction for any reason or no reason at all, and it's all virtuous because the president is evil. Well, until last month, David Sorensen was a speechwriter in the White House, and then the Washington Post accused him of domestic violence. Now, why did they do this? Because of the word of his ex-wife. Sorensen lost his job. He says the Post had no evidence that he ever did anything wrong. The Post had no court records, no police report, no evidence, no pictures, nothing. And now his life has been destroyed. David Sorensen joins us tonight with his story. David, I want to say at the outset that we've never met. I've never spoken to you in my life before this. I don't know anything about your marriage. I don't even know your ex-wife's name. But what struck me about this story, normally I would never get involved in anything like this because I know that these things tend to be really complicated.